Our next speaker is Sue Evans. Sue works as the director for the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. She spends any spare time farming, running or beating with Mark and her two sons. Her topic is influencing policy and regulation, which she believes there is a great opportunity to do now. She's supported by the John Oldacre Foundation. Sue, welcome to the stage.
Thank you and good morning. I first would like to begin with thanking the Nuffield Trust and the John Oldacre Foundation for presenting me with this extraordinary opportunity. Since starting my Nuffield, I've also started a new job as Director Wales for the Game Wildlife Conservation Trust, through which I manage to have the opportunity to influence government with the 80 years' worth of peer-reviewed science, and also work with farmers, landowners and shooters on the ground in developing solutions. When I'm not working, this is what I'm doing as much as possible out on the farm with the kids, Welsh borders and up in Anglesey. So why did I do my Nuffield Scholarship? Why did I pick this particular subject? I'm doing this in order to give me this opportunity to be able to communicate with you and inspire you, to make you think about how best you can influence policy and regulation at this crucial time. Farmers, like my father and son, are great problem solvers, but unlike you, most farmers are not great report writers. For my children to have any chance at a future in Wales agriculture now is particularly important in influencing policy and regulation. Regulation often seems overly complex and ineffective and delivers unintended consequences, such as the recent phosphate regulations imposed on dairy farmers in the Netherlands, 2017, who were required to reduce their herd sizes by 20% of their 2015 numbers. Many of them had been expanding their numbers after quotas had been removed. The consequences being that now many of them are facing potential bankruptcies. Majority of farming businesses, I'm sure as you will know, feel that they don't have the capacity to keep on top of the current regulation, let alone consider time to influence new policy and regulation that's coming their way. Yet when regulation comes into force and it affects your farming business in a negative way, you will turn activist, and you do turn and get solutions then. My objective, therefore, is to influence you, to inspire farmers to influence policy and regulation. But it's not only down to you, we need the government as well to start listening more to farming solutions when they're producing policy and regulation. Before governments submit consultations, by which time much of the thinking around the direction of a new piece of legislation is already in place, where do the policymakers get their ideas from? When I ask farmers, their initial answer is, well, the farming unions represent us. They go out there and have conversations with government, and they influence them. But then when we discussed further, they actually agreed that the farming unions all the way around the world don't actually produce evidence and write possible solutions so much as respond to threats to the farming industry. So who does present the evidence and the information to the policymakers? I asked the policymakers themselves, where do they start? And I was told that the minister and the senior civil servants will give a direction, and the policy officers will then go off and search the published data and regular sources of information, as well as looking further around the world as to what is going on in other countries. And NGOs are also very good at providing reports. As farmers rarely write reports, then government are unlikely to get much input from them at the design stage. By the time the consultation documents seek responses, most of the preliminary thinking around an approach to a problem has been done. But there are things that you as farmers can do. Tell everybody you meet your ideas. I've found over the years that the most successes I've had is when I've been telling everybody about a certain idea I've got, and somehow it goes viral eventually, and they all start talking about it. Another thing, and probably the most effective for most farmers, is to find an advocate. Find somebody who you believe will promote your idea, your solutions to problems. Like in the Netherlands now, the farmers were saying to me that the banks may be their best advocate, because if they're going bankrupt and at 100,000 euros nearly a hectare for land, it's going to affect the banks. Think about who does produce this evidence, and on your behalf, and in the way that government understands, and feed more resources into those people. In the Republic of Ireland, I met 4 advocates for farmers, one of which was Brendan Dunford, who comes from a farming background, and after a degree in engineering, he carried out his PhD on the Burren, where he collected ecological data from 100 farms and interviewed all the farmers. I had a chance to have a look around the 72,000 hectares of the Burren, only a small part of it, mind you. And Brendan has built up a long-term trusting relationship with the farmers over the last 20 years. They've managed to prove the benefit of winter grazing with low levels of summer grazing to the ecology. They've worked with a local feed company who's producing cobs to feed the overwintering cattle, which has been developed particularly for the needs of the Burren cattle and includes minerals as well as nutrients, and have resulted in improvement in the cattle productivity and costs. There are local issues on the ground, such as young people leaving the area and undergrazing. But Brendan's highlighted the fact that this is an area, working area, not a park. It's a living landscape. They carry out work with the local schools, and the farmers themselves now are conducting monthly walks and proud of what they've achieved. So whereas before, they've now been registered as a charity for 10 years with 3 part-time members of staff, many volunteers, whereas previously they were scarce reference to the farmers at all in this area. They're now credited with the work, and a payment regime to farmers in Ireland has been set up on the back of this. In India, I met many advocates for farmers. The most extraordinary was Prakash, who since the 1980s flooding disaster in the Andhra Pradesh area has worked constantly towards a better living for the tribal farmers. He took me to meet government officials, farmers, and other advocates, many of whom are NGOs. I discovered that he's widely respected, and even though he's now in his 70s, he exhausted me with at least 3 meetings a day, every day, for 2 weeks. Much of Indian policy and regulation is familiar, having originated from the British rule, but there are obviously great differences as well. One of them being, as discussed yesterday, in India, though, most of the farmers are women. But also the fact that the NGOs play such a significant role in representing the farmers. Here's an unexpected example that I found of solution to a livestock problem. A multi-story cow house in the centre of Hyderabad, a city of 11 million people with a homeless sacred cow problem. Governments devise policy and regulation mainly to provide solutions to problems. The most important element when communicating with government is therefore to provide them with solutions. The best regulation enables people to want to do the right thing. Therefore, it's in everyone's interest to get it right. We should be proactively leading with the answers, preferably before the problems are identified in the press. We can develop our own self-certification schemes, like we heard about yesterday with the Alaskan fishing industry. We can do this work with others, whether it's Arla, Marks and Spencer's, Nestle, or even more of the unsuspected types that you hadn't thought of yet. This will reassure not only government, but our customers of our integrity and our positive credentials, and will ensure that we do not end up with unintended consequences from poor legislation, such as is happening with the phosphate regulations in the Netherlands. And you can demonstrate your good ideas, as here with a farmer near Neuchâtel in Switzerland, who is keen to demonstrate what he believes is a better collaborative farming model. he invited the group of worldwide professors who got together to discuss agri-environment governance, and I was lucky enough to spend the week with them. But the government also needs to make changes. The government really needs to ensure that there is genuine consultation with farmers, and this acknowledges and takes on board farmers' knowledge gained from experience. Here in Scotland, a report in last week's Farmer's Guardian about how crofters feel undermined with the issue of sea eagle predation. And Ian Lindsay, who I met out in Skye at his home earlier in the year, has said to me this week, it's a complete nightmare, and the affected crofting communities now seem to be at the epicentre of a massive, sophisticated news management programme. Many farmers, particularly from the UK and Netherlands, felt that meetings organised by government and NGOs to engage with farmers was carried out as a tick box exercise and never resulted in any action. It is also important to improve the flow of information from the ground to the policymakers and then back from the policymakers back to the farmers. In India, there seemed to be an effective flow of information from farmers through facilitators to local research centres and back again. As well, out in Brazil, where we saw some absolutely fantastic Embrapa research stations. In the UK, there are demonstration farms and trial farms in place, but policy writers rarely get any feedback or input into the farmers. I was very privileged to be invited to attend a conference and then 3 days of working with a group of world-leading professors on their developing theories on the reinventing of food systems out in Neuchâtel. When I set out, I had not considered looking at the academic input into policy and regulation. However, the important role that academics play came up over and over again. There are obstructions within the academic world, and it seems to me that farmers, governments, and academics should be working closer. In order to do so, there will need to be change made by all parties. A starting point within the tertiary education sector may be to get students actually responding to consultations, to give them confidence. I couldn't finish without including this slide. As my core interest is in the environment and farming, I was thrilled to get the opportunity to visit the Amazon. Looking at policy and regulation, it's hugely complex, and I'll let you consider the implications of farmers in the Amazon basin having to set aside 80% of their farm to revert to rainforest. My final message to you, therefore, is farmers have a greater role to play in producing policy and regulation. If we don't provide the solutions to government, others will. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.